Kodai Senga says he wants to stay with the Mets. Now, we all know that the Mets have been openly shopping him. And if you're on Reddit, then you might know that his jerseys have been discounted at the Mets Black Friday sale. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you might think that he's already gone. Well, I'm going to talk about that, and we're going to discuss if it's a mistake for the Mets to trade Kodai Senga. First off, Senga says that he wants to stay. I think that's great. It doesn't really matter though, right? Stearns and Cohen aren't going to base their decision on what the player wants at this point. Unless, of course, he was demanding to leave, and then they might, try to find a soft landing spot for him. So the reason that the Mets want to trade Kodai Senga comes down to the following. He was injured a lot last year, had a rough season, at least the second half. When he came back from injury, he just wasn't the same pitcher. Now, he was the beneficiary of some luck the first part of the season, and it was part of the reason that he had the lowest ERA in the majors for some time. Luck assisted, but he was still pitching okay. So aside from injuries, trading him would allow the Mets to bring in two starting pitchers. One of those needing to be an ace, and the other probably the top half of the rotation. Senga, though, has higher trade value than any of the other options, really. Peterson, they're not going to trade because he's going into his last year of arbitration, so he just comes a lot cheaper than the $15 million that they're going to pay Senga. Manaea doesn't have the value on the contract that he's on in the trade market that Senga does, and might be more difficult to move than Senga. And Clay Holmes, I just don't think the Mets want to try to trade him at all. He was a successful transition into a starting pitcher last year, and I think the Mets would be silly to cut that experiment short after 1 year when it was really starting to produce some results. Now, he wasn't going super deep into games, but it was his first year back as a starting pitcher, so I think he did about as well as you could have expected there, and if they stretch him a little bit farther this year, he might even have more success as a starting pitcher. What kind of return would the Mets see for trading Kodai Senga? A lot of what I've heard out there is that all you're really going to get back for him is a reliever. And it's not going to be an elite reliever, right? The type of players that you're going to get back for Kodai Senga, it's going to be something like trading Senga to the Giants to get Budo back, which I would rather roll the dice on Senga for a few more seasons and see if he can come close to the potential he showed the first half of last year and his rookie year, rather than just trading him for a controllable reliever like Budo, when that's all Budo is a controllable reliever. I don't think you're getting a starter back in return for him, and you're definitely not getting an elite reliever for Kodai Senga at his current value. So I think the logical choice should be for the Mets to keep Kodai Senga. And there's a few reasons why I'm going to get to that. So Senga has more upside than anybody else you're going to get in return for him or to replace him, either through the free agency or through a trade market. He's a number 2 caliber pitcher at his best. And that's higher upside than you're going to find anywhere else. He's also at a fairly low cost of $15 million per season. That's probably where most of his trade value comes in right now, is that he doesn't cost much and he's a starting pitcher. So if he can stay healthy and he can perform like we know he can, then he's an absolute steal at $15 million. I also think it's risky to trade Senga away until you've brought in 2 pitchers, because let's be honest, you're going to need 8 or 9 starting pitchers in modern baseball. That's just how pitching staffs work now. And 4 or 5 guys are going to get hurt every year at various times, and you're not going to be able to keep anybody healthy anymore, at least everybody healthy anymore. Not with this idea that everyone goes out there and throws their best pitch and throws it as hard as they can, as many times as possible. Pitchers just don't stay healthy the way they did 30 years ago. I also don't think that Senga is going to be involved in a trade that brings back one of those starting pitchers that you need. It's just most likely that you get that reliever in return that I was talking about earlier. And in that case, I think you're just cutting salary with Kodai Senga, which cutting salary and selling low on Kodai Senga isn't the best analytical move for a rich team like the New York Mets. And in any trade where a starter comes back the other way, you're going to be giving up other prospects, and Senga isn't even going to be the main piece of that deal. So that's why I don't really buy trading him away for another starter. I just don't think that's as much of an option right now, especially after the Sonny Gray trade already happened. There are absolutely no better options than Kodai Senga at the $15 to $20 million range in free agency. So that's another reason that it just makes sense to keep Kodai. If Kodai was out there in free agency right now or available on the trade market, he's absolutely the type of player that Stearns would go out and trade for or sign on this contract. So trading him doesn't make that much sense to me. And again, you need a plethora of starting pitchers. You need 8 or 9. Injuries are going to happen to all of those guys. So you got to be prepared for that. And Kodai gives us a little bit more depth with the upside that nobody else on the market would really have in terms of replacing him. And speaking of that upside, the Ghost Fork is still an elite pitch. Again, you're not going to find somebody else with a pitch that good available right now. And his velocity hasn't dropped either. So physically, Kodai Senga is still absolutely capable of performing at an elite level. If you can keep him healthy and keep him mentally focused, then I think he has the best upside out of any possible pitcher versus any possible pitcher that the Mets could add. Furthermore, team control through 2028. Even with a small bounce back year for Kodai Senga, he would still have way more trade value going into next season than he does right now. So if you wanted to clear him off to make room for some of next season's free agents that are going to be out there, then you could wait, trade him next year after a bounce back year, hopefully, and he would just be worth 4 times what he is now. You're going to get so much bigger of a return by holding on to him when he has 3 more years of team control left in him. Are the Mets shopping Kodai Senga? They absolutely are. Would it be a mistake to trade him, especially if you're not bringing back a starting pitcher in return that could potentially have the same upside or at the very least has a much higher floor? I think that would be a mistake. So let's see what the Mets do, but I think they would be foolish not to consider hanging on to Kodai Senga for at least 1 more year. See if he has the bounce back. See if he can be one of the best 3, 4, or 5 starters in Major League Baseball, not relying on him to be a 1 or a 2. And then they can, if he's healthy and pitching well, I think they'd be happy to have him throwing a playoff game for them if that's like a game 3. Anyways, thanks for listening to me. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you think Senga should stay a Met or if they should sell now.